Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolute foundational principles of machinery operation. But listen, we aren't going to look at this as some tedious compliance chore or, just another boring checklist. Instead, we're framing machinery preparation as the ultimate superpower, the exact thing that separates true, highly skilled professionals from mere amateurs. If you really want to master heavy equipment, the absolute most important work you do actually happens before the engine ever even starts. Okay, let's dive into our tactical mission briefing. We're going to cover the professional mindset, decoding the job, hazards in your defense, the operator's playbook, reading the worksite, and finally, getting ready for action. All right, Section 1, the professional mindset. Amateurs guess, pros check. Notice the massive contrast here. The amateur approach, it's basically jumping onto the machine, turning the key, and just hoping for the best. It's totally reliant on luck. The professional approach, on the other hand, relies on a rock-solid, systematic three-phase method. Every single time they approach a job, a pro follows these exact phases: prepare, operate safely, and finish properly. It's really not about how fast you can turn the ignition. It's about setting up your environment so that failure literally isn't even an option.
So the crucial point is that this all comes down to a massive foundational concept called duty of care. Basically, this means being legally and ethically responsible for the safety of yourself, other people, and the environment while you're operating machinery. The stakes here are incredibly high. Duty of care isn't just some corporate jargon. It means that if someone gets hurt or a habitat gets destroyed, well, that responsibility sits squarely on your shoulders.
Moving right along to Section 2, decoding the job, your mission briefing. Before a true professional even thinks about loading a single piece of equipment onto a trailer, they arm themselves with precise knowledge. They do this by checking these exact 5 things on every single job card. Number 1, location and access details. 2, the task, like what exact activity are you actually doing? 3, the outcome, meaning the specific standard the finished work has to meet. 4, the time frame or deadline, and 5, special instructions. Think site rules or hidden hazards. And hey, here's a massive pro tip for you. If any of these are missing or vague, stopping to ask a 2-minute question right now can literally save you hours of painful rework later on. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why confirming that outcome is so absolutely vital. Think about comparing 2 very different mulching jobs. If you're mulching a display garden bed, you need a fine finish, a really careful, precise pace, and a much smaller machine so you don't destroy the surrounding plants. But what if you're mulching a back paddock? Well, you need a rough finish, a fast pace to handle the high volume, and a much larger course-setting machine. The required outcome dictates exactly which machine and settings you select. The task decides the machine, not the other way around. All right, Section 3, hazards and your defense, shielding the worksite. We have to face a pretty harsh reality here. Heavy machinery has absolutely zero sense of danger. None. All that responsibility to keep people safe, it sits 100% on the operator's shoulders. So let's dejargonize 2 safety terms you hear all the time. A hazard is anything with the potential to cause harm. For example, the rapidly spinning blades of a mulcher. The risk, however, is the actual chance and severity of that harm occurring. So the risk is the high likelihood of severe injury, or worse, amputation, if a hand reaches into those spinning blades. Our main job is to put a solid shield between the hazard and the risk. But before you shield the site, you've got to look at yourself. You absolutely must observe strict do not operate conditions. If you're affected by alcohol, affected by drugs, taking any medication that induces drowsiness, or if you're heavily fatigued, unwell, or even just really distracted, you do not operate, period. These are strict assessment conditions, and operating under these states is absolutely non-negotiable. An impaired operator is, without a doubt, the most dangerous hazard on any worksite. And remember this critical rule. PPE is the last line of defense. It's not the first. We so often think slapping on a high-vis vest and safety glasses makes us invincible. It doesn't. PPE only protects you when your other planning controls, things like physical machine guards and strict exclusion zones, have completely failed. Because it's your absolute last resort, your PPE must be perfectly fitted, rigorously inspected, and flawlessly maintained. Section 4, the operator's playbook. Know your weapon. Now, nobody expects you to magically memorize how every single machine on Earth works. That is exactly what the manuals and standard operating procedures are actually for. They are your ultimate cheat codes for professional, safe machinery operation. And what's really interesting and honestly brilliantly simple about this is how standard safety symbols like the book icon for read the manual or the graphic showing a hand caught in gears for entanglement are perfectly designed to warn you at a glance. They communicate critical limits and severe dangers instantly, completely bypassing the need for you to stand there trying to read a dense paragraph of text while a massive machine is running right next to you. So let me throw a direct question at you just to test your understanding of working under what we call broad direction. You're out there doing your pre-start check and you find a fault. When do you grab your tools and fix it yourself? And when do you tag the machine out and report it to a supervisor? Well, here is the definitive answer. You can change a minor filter or a basic belt if you are explicitly trained to do so. But if it involves the engine, the hydraulics, or literally any safety-critical parts like guards or blades, do not touch it. You tag it out and you report it to a qualified person. Knowing the limits of your role in your training is a massive sign of a professional. It's not a weakness.
Section 5. Reading the Worksite. Surveying the battlefield.
You know, you can have the perfect machine perfectly prepared, but if you put it on the wrong site, it can be a complete and devastating disaster. To survey the battlefield properly, we use two critical documents, and you really need to know the difference. A SWMS, or Safe Work Method Statement, lists the overall hazards, risks, and controls for the whole task before you start, especially for high-risk work. A JSA, or Job Safety Analysis, is much more granular. It actually breaks the specific job down into individual steps to identify the hazard and control for every single action. Completing these creates a cognitive map of your worksite in your brain before the engine even turns over. Let's move to and see how this builds when we introduce Mother Nature. Dynamic weather completely alters your tactical approach on the ground. Wet ground dramatically increases the risk of slipping, bogging down, and dangerous rollovers. Wind creates hazardous chemical spray drift. Extreme heat? That guarantees operator fatigue and engine overheating. Dust and debris will absolutely destroy your visibility and block up moving parts. A professional adjusts their operation for every single one of these variables.
Okay, let's put this into practice with a real-world scenario. You arrive to mulch a garden bed on a sloping site. There's been heavy overnight rain, so the ground is incredibly wet and soft. What do you do? Take a second and think like a true professional.
Here's the punchy professional answer. Reassess. Do not start the machine. The risk of that machine slipping on that wet slope or bogging down and tearing up the soft turf is just way too high. You need to consider bringing in a much lighter machine or simply delaying the job entirely until the ground dries. Having the confidence to actually stop work when conditions are unsafe, that is the ultimate hallmark of a true pro. Finally, Section 6, Ready for Action, the final briefing. Let's bring this explainer home by tying all these phases of preparation back to our core philosophy of prevention. Right before you finally turn that key, you absolutely must ask yourself 3 vital questions. 1, who could be affected by this work? Think about bystanders, public footpaths, or even other contractors. 2, what could be damaged? Are there underground services, delicate structures, or waterways nearby? 3, what controls do I need in place right now? Do I need exclusion zones, warning signage, or maybe a dedicated spotter? These final bystander and environmental checks must be locked in before the engine is ever turned on. The machine is off, the site is perfectly surveyed, and the job is fully decoded. So, when you step up to that equipment tomorrow, will you cross your fingers and guess like an amateur, or will you systematically plan and execute like a professional? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.